Good afternoon, everybody. I would love to welcome Senator Ellman to our next episode of Across the Aisle. Senator Ellman, could you tell us a little bit about your district and kind of your background?
Sure. Thank you. My name is Laura Ellman. I've lived here in Naperville for about 21 years, but I'm an Illinois native, born in Chicago, but raised kind of in the northwest suburbs. And I serve District 21, which is comprised of a lot of Naperville, some Warrenville, Glen Ellen, Lombard, and little bits of Lisle and Bolingbrook, and even some Downers Grove. So I'm thrilled to serve. This is my second term, so my fifth year serving as state senator. And I have to say, I love it, and I feel so lucky that I get to do this. So
You, you
thrilled
know,
and thrilled to
you,
be here.
it's always struck me. I think, serving in the General Assembly, serving in public office sometimes is a very thankless job. So, there's got to be a lot of, just real dedication on your end what prompted you to run for public office in the first place? What was it that motivated you?
That's a great question because my background was not in politics at all. Um, I I was a math major in college, got a master's in statistics, and worked in industry for 25 years. I worked at 3M, at Molex, Alcoa, a hearing aid company called Phonak, which is also known as Sonova, and some smaller manufacturers in product development, process development and scale up, experimentation and using data. And I loved it. And part of what I loved doing was I was there to help solve problems, using math and data and trying to get my not so fantastic people skills in order, to get problems solved. And it was always interesting, whether they were big or small, just a lot of fun. And now I see that serving as a state senator, one of the things that makes me feel so lucky is I get to ask really interesting people some really interesting questions. And we're just solving problems that are on a different scale with different sets of data and with different people. And I love it. But one of the most I don't know if I'm answering your question. I'm sorry. I'm kind of going off on a tangent, but
This is great. No, this is really
you know,
interesting.
being able to serve to help other people solve problems, so one of my biggest duties, and one of the things that I get to do is help constituents deal with issues with the state of Illinois. I don't know if you've ever, gotten a driver's license or dealt with any kind of state agency, but they're not always the most efficient or customer focused or easy to deal with. And that's at just the easy stuff. Once you have a difficult situation and everybody's unique and everybody's situation is unique, and if things get complicated, sometimes people need help dealing with the state. Sorry, in the back. And that's one of the things that we get to do. We get to help people during with unemployment benefits. There were a lot of cases, and everybody's case was unique, and they didn't always get resolved quickly. But we were able to get people's problems resolved, and that's one of the joys of serving.
I really respect that. I think, I think that's oftentimes I think, when you're talking with, with voters, with residents. I don't think the average voter oftentimes realizes just how much of a help that you can be in opening the lines of communication with state agencies, and how, that's really one of your primary duties.
Exactly
And
right.
and we've gotten so far away from really talking about that a lot of times.
Yeah.
But kind of switching gears, I mean, a big part of your job is, legislative in nature, and
Mhm.
oftentimes that's correcting, legislation, with unintended, that maybe that has unintended consequences, and things like that. But in your 5 years so far, what have been some of the highlights for you?
Well, you know, when I was new, you know, and I still feel like learning so much still. I still feel like I'm new. Um, but even my first year, we tackled some really major legislation. And that was really exciting. Of course, I did not take a lead in that, but just watching it unfold and hearing the discussions and getting constituent input on things like the minimum wage
Mhm.
and lead water lines and the capital bill. And, there have been such a variety of big legislation that has come down the pike. That has been great. But, um, now that I'm getting a little bit more seasoned, being able to carry some of the legislation that I've carried on workforce development, on fentanyl education. I'm really excited about some things that are coming down the line. One of my projects is that I chair the Hydrogen Economy Task Force, and hydrogen is a form of fuel that doesn't have carbon dioxide attached to it. So it could be a quite a bit of a difference in an alternative fuel that doesn't, emit carbon dioxide when it's burned or when it's used. And in fact, the the emissions from using hydrogen is water vapor. So we could really, really attract a lot of federal investment, a lot of private investment, and generate a lot more economic activity uh, by being a leader in using hydrogen. So, really excited about that.
That's very interesting. What other legislative accomplishments are you most proud of? I understand, like, I understand how it works, and just even co-sponsoring a bill that you've been able to see kind of grow and everything. Is there anything that kind of sticks out to you that I mean, there's so much
Yes.
work that the General Assembly does, but anything else that sticks out?
I'll tell you what, the best moments for me, you know, legislation runs the gamut of, very technical and, oh, this is just cleanup language, or we've got to, there's been an update to a federal law, so we got to update our language, to things that are really transformative. And, uh, but one of the things that really makes me feel proud and glad and brings me joy is bringing ideas that come from right here in the district to Springfield, from constituents. There were two last year that, in particular, one was on A1C screenings for diabetes to make those more affordable and have them covered by insurance. A constituent came to me, a concerned constituent, and said, Laura, Senator Ellman, these things are not covered, but they're so important to catch diabetes early. And so I brought it to the legislation and I got it passed. And because of that constituent, people's lives have changed. And then, of course, there's another constituent um, whose son died of an overdose on Christmas morning one year. And part of the reason that he died was because he was using, illicit drugs with other people, and he was overdosing, and the people that were with him were too afraid to call 911 for fear of being arrested. So we expanded because based on he championed this. This was, you know, obviously he felt so strongly about this, but he never wanted it to happen to another parent again. So through his leadership, I helped push through legislation that expanded the Good Samaritan law so that people who are overdosing can get the help they need when they need it. So those
That
are the
is
things that
wonderful.
make me so
Yeah.
excited. And gosh, wow, I get to do this.
See,
It's great.
and that is wonderful. Thank you for your service. And I think with the opioid crisis, the way it is and how it's only been exacerbated with, coming, through the pandemic and everything. And I think things like that are so crucial, steps like that. I don't think there's any one of us that has been untouched by the opioid crisis and the fentanyl crisis.
I know. I was just going to say fentanyl is
Mhm,
such a threat
mhm,
because, not only is it lethal, well,
mhm,
mainly because it's lethal at such low doses, um, but it can be added to illicit pills and labs in China, labs in Mexico, labs in, who knows where they're popping up. They're popping up everywhere. And not only are they making fentanyl, but they're formulating new types of synthetic fentanyl that can be even more lethal. And we've got to do everybody's got to do whatever it takes as far as education, interdiction at the federal level and state law enforcement, um, and and even treating it as a healthcare issue as well. you
mhm.
know so we've got to have all of the cylinders going at once on making sure that people are safe from uh, overdose deaths.
And it's
It's
constantly changing too. So I imagine that,
Yeah.
just it's almost like playing whack-a-mole, I think, because
Oh,
just when you think you've got one angle covered, then, something else becomes, some other issues become illuminated because of that.
and these are being distributed in the dark through the dark web, and it's yeah,
Yeah.
it is. There's so many different whack-a-mole chains to
Yeah.
it. It's yeah, it's a big, big problem. So we've got to do what we can.
Well, I certainly am so grateful to you for everything that you do, everything that your office does. I cannot thank you enough. I'm so grateful that you're going to be able to join us for our end of session recap.
I
I
know,
think
I'm
that's going to
excited.
be a really interesting conversation, very similar to kind of what we had today. Kind of, hoping to expand on a little bit on, some of the other, highlights of the legislative season, and maybe get some general forecasting for maybe what we can expect in veto session. As we conclude today, do you have anything else that you'd like to add?
Well, you just reminded me of
Yeah,
another thing that
yeah.
makes my district so awesome, and is that you know our district, Naperville, District 21, um, has got some really well informed people, and it's organizations like yours and a wide variety of organizations that are dedicated to
Mhm.
not only supporting local health, welfare, business, but also informing people. So, you know, thank you. It's great, and if I can add to it in whatever way that I can, I'm honored to do it.